Hello, welcome back to the Premier League review. Today we're going to be talking about Manchester United's dire performance against Newcastle. We're going to be talking Gabriel Jesus and his sparkling feet. But we're going to start with sackings as two more Premier League managers have lost their job. Of course, Graham Potter being sacked by Chelsea and Brendan Rodgers leaving Leicester City by mutual consent after a number of years in charge and, of course, lifting the FA Cup. Let's dive straight into Chelsea. Graham Potter joined Chelsea in September, signing a 5-year contract with the Blues and has already been sacked. This is something that's been coming. Chelsea sitting 11th in the Premier League, but was it the right decision? Graham Potter's sacking comes after a 2-0 defeat to Aston Villa. Chelsea released a statement on Sunday evening saying that Graham Potter was no longer at the football club. He's going to depart the club. Of course, Chelsea have been pretty poor this season. The standout performances have come in the Champions League as Graham Potter guided Chelsea to the quarter-finals after beating Borussia Dortmund. But the performances on the pitch, quite frankly, haven't been good enough. Too many big chances missed. And a lack of, clean and composure in the final third. Graham Potter's final team selection as Chelsea manager was a little bit strange, with Reece James and Cucurella playing as outside centre-backs in a back three supporting Koulibaly. This is an interesting one. Chelsea fans very critical of Potter's selections and tactics. Of course, with one of the best right wing-backs in the world of football in Reece James, him playing as a third centre-back didn't sit quite right with Chelsea fans. But there has been a lack of performance. Kai Havertz's ability in front of goal has come into question. João Felix seems to be playing really well, but again, not contributing enough in the final third in terms of goals and assists. But overall, Chelsea look very, very exposed on the counter-attack. Ollie Watkins running riot in behind that back three, basically meaning that it was the end of the road for Graham Potter. Graham Potter, in fact, has the worst points to game record in Premier League history as Chelsea manager. Well, the joint worst at just 1.27 points per game, which is pretty shoddy. I think long-term, this appointment was a good appointment, but it appears that it hasn't quite worked out. I think Graham Potter's had a number of challenges as Chelsea manager. One of the biggest things for Chelsea is their sort of structure or their ability to win trophies has been a massive part of their, Premier League history, since probably Roman Abramovich took charge of the club. But I think one of the big things with Chelsea is their lack of ability to sell players in January, a massively bloated squad. In the Premier League, it'd be quite difficult for any manager to deal with that circumstance. And of course, Graham Potter's dealing with players that don't want to be there. Hakim Ziyech was at the PSG offices to sign a contract with them in January. That move fell through. There's a lot of unhappy players there. You think about the contract situation with Mason Mount. You're looking at situations with Christian Pulisic wanting to leave the football club. There's a number of players there that would be quite difficult to manage, but Graham Potter has underperformed as Chelsea manager. That being said, I still think he's a fantastic coach and could easily go in to the Leicester City dugout and do a fantastic job. Of course, Leicester City sacking Brendan Rodgers with the club sat in 19th in the Premier League. I think the really interesting part of that with Brendan Rodgers, he seems to be quite a cyclical manager. You remember the start of his career at Liverpool was absolutely fantastic. Then they dropped off after about 2.5 years. But a similar thing has kind of come with Brendan Rodgers. His team has massively underperformed this season. He leaves Leicester City with just a 47% win rate. And you consider at the start of his tenure, when he's competing for Champions League football, that is a humongous drop-off. And the performances this season haven't been good enough. Conceding 49 goals in the Premier League has been a massive problem. 17 defeats, only 7 victories. And you look at the talent of the squad, there's a number of good players in there, like Iheanacho, James Maddison, Yuri Tielemans, Harvey Barnes. There's enough quality in the team to not be in a relegation battle, hence why Leicester City have parted company with Brendan Rodgers. And looking at it, it doesn't seem to be the wrong call, a run of 7 games without a win, including 6 losses. And Leicester have been a team that's been very beatable in the Premier League. They've hit some form, but it's not been as consistent as previous years. And I think it's a situation where Leicester had to pull the trigger. But with someone like Graham Potter available, they've got to do everything in their power to sign the former Brighton manager. Tactically flexible. I think Leicester City would have been a better jump for Brendan Rodgers going from Brighton to Leicester than Brighton to Chelsea. That feels like a bit of a gulf in terms of the personalities and the egos that you're going to have to manage. But looking at both teams as well, with Spurs looking for a new manager in the summer, In terms of these three clubs, they're all in really interesting positions where the next manager appointment is going to be crucial for their long-term development. There's 5 managers that are available right now that these clubs should be looking at. Marcelo Gallardo, Julian Nagelsmann, of course Graham Potter, Sampaoli and Marcelo Bielsa. I think any of those 5 going to any of the clubs would be a big benefit. Of course, Graham Potter not going to Chelsea, but could do a great job at Tottenham, could do a great job at Leicester City. Being a manager in the Premier League is tough. 13 managers have lost their jobs this season, which is the most in a single Premier League season in the history of the competition. The hardest job in the world being a Premier League manager. So let's move on to the title race. It is time now to talk about Mikel Arteta and Pep Guardiola, 2 managers that definitely aren't going to be getting the sack in the next 3 months. Manchester City played first in the Premier League weekend against Liverpool and had an emphatic 4-1 victory, but Arsenal at 3 o'clock equalled that with a really good result against Leeds United. One of the big positives, I think, for Arsenal going into the back end of the season is the attackers that are returning and the fluidity that Mikel Arteta can give his side. Arsenal were without Bukayo Saka. He had an illness the day before, so he started on the bench. But Arteta went with relatively new signing Leandro Trossard, Gabriel Jesus and Gabriel Martinelli as his front 3. Gabriel Jesus started the season off in sensational form. The intensity that he gave the Arsenal attacking line with the ball and without the ball was a massive reason for Arsenal's early season form. He picked up an injury away with Brazil, but now we're seeing the impact of him on the side. One of the biggest things with Gabriel Jesus is a very fluid and flexible player, but he's explosive with the ball at his feet, and he's offers something in the penalty area that the rest of the Arsenal team probably don't. And that's that dynamic element, that ability to complete dribbles. He completed 4 of his 8 dribbles against Leeds United on Saturday and, of course, won the penalty after a fantastic run. So let's take a look at Arsenal's setup from a tactical perspective. Of course, as we mentioned, Saka was on the bench from the start, and Arteta started with Trossard on the right, Jesus through the middle, and Martinelli on the left. What I like about this front 3 is the fluidity, but also the narrowness on the right-hand side of the pitch. In fact, what we saw was Ben White play more of an attacking role than we do with Saka. As Trossard slightly drifts inside, we saw Xhaka, of course, join Jesus as a forward, and Ben White attack a little bit more, leaving Odegaard a little bit deeper, to get on the ball in those deep areas and build. In terms of an offence, it means that Arsenal are different. They've got a different threat in there. The link between Trossard and Gabriel Jesus was fantastic, and we saw that combination play for the second goal. But I like the fluidity, I like the difference that Trossard is giving this Arsenal team. You take a look at the stats since the World Cup, Trossard has got more assists than any other player in the Premier League and grabbed a fantastic assist in the link play. But before we dive into the link up between Trossard and Gabriel Jesus in terms of the fluidity from a right winger to a centre forward, let's talk about the first goal that really highlights Gabriel Jesus' technical dribbling that's very different to the skills of Eddie Nketiah and Leandro Trossard. We picked the ball up with Arsenal working it to the left-hand side. Gabriel Martinelli in possession. Of course, this season the width has been so important in the final third and is usually held by both of the wingers. But with Trossard playing as the right forward, Arsenal is slightly different. Just before we dive into the move, we can clearly see the makeup of Arsenal's attack. Gabriel Jesus is in the left channel, Trossard's in the right channel, and of course Granit Xhaka's acting as that kind of number 10, that pivot point. Martinelli looks inside to find the feet of his teammate on the ball. As soon as Granit Xhaka receives, he makes that move to draw the defence away. Great off-the-ball run from Gabriel Martinelli. He spots the space to attack in the middle, which opens up more room for Gabriel Jesus to receive defeat. Of course, as the plays moved out to the left-hand side, the overlap is crucial to this move. Again, it takes the attention of the defender. We can clearly see Luke Ayling pointing to the overlapping run to, of course, Christensen to cover that move. But Gabriel Jesus has quality on the ball. He's going to go for the dribble. He's going to look to take on the Leeds United defender. What I love about this is we see both of Gabriel Jesus' feet and feints to beat the defenders. First up, of course, is taking on Christensen. Zinchenko takes the attention away slightly, which opens up a little bit of space for Jesus to drive into the penalty area, again opening up the threat of the penalty. The first shot feint is absolutely fantastic. Gabriel Jesus feinting to shoot with his stronger right foot, chopping the ball, drawing the defender in and bypassing him. And then even better, another feint, this time on his left foot, to draw in Luke Ayling, who stupidly dives in and catches Jesus. But I think the quality of the balance of Jesus in the penalty area is going to open up a number of moves for Arsenal as the Premier League moves to the sort of end of the season, as defenders get slightly tired, you're going to have these types of plays. Gabriel Jesus feints on his right, feints on his left, beats Luke Ayling and then's taken down. Absolutely fantastic play from the Brazilian centre-forward, of course. Slots his penalty away, becoming the second top-scoring Brazilian in the league, only behind Roberto Firmino. So let's move on to the second goal and dive into a little bit of analysis and the fluidity between the play. In this instance, Trossard has moved into the number 9 area. Gabriel Jesus is on the right wing. One of the key themes that I saw in this game was, in fact, Ben White being the right winger, and whoever was playing as the nominal right winger moving slightly inside and operating in the inside channel, with, of course, Odegaard a little bit deeper. As Arsenal build out from the back, of course, Zinchenko involved in that defensive midfield position. Rob Holding spots the opportunity to drive forward. This signals and triggers the move from Gabriel Jesus to drop off the line and receive to feet. From this, Leeds United have got massive problems. Gabriel Jesus is receiving in between the lines. Trossard's going to make a forward run, which is going to further drop the Leeds United defence. Jesus drives inside, and we can clearly see the slight tweak in Arsenal's attacking structure. Martinelli wide left, Ben White wide right, and Jesus in this inside channel opens up the pass into the feet by carrying inside, drawing pressure from the midfield and simply slotting a ball. What I love about this is Gabriel Jesus doesn't stop, doesn't admire his pass, but he gets on his bike. It's very difficult to deal with forwards that start from deep. Who picks them up? Is it the defenders? Who tracks them? Is it the midfielders? This move is absolutely fantastic. Trossard's first touch is brilliant, attacks the channel really well, draws both the centre-backs over, which creates a massive little pocket of space in the box for, of course, Gabriel Jesus to attack, receive the cross and put Arsenal into the lead, into a massively commanding position. Arsenal have been fantastic this season. What I like about it is it's not the same Arsenal attack that we usually see. It's not two wingers wide, it's inside forwards in those central positions, combining for a brilliant goal for Arsenal to go into a commanding position in a vitally important Premier League game. And if we take a look at the average positions of the Arsenal team, we can see the more narrow front three. We've got Trossard number 19, Gabriel Jesus number 9, of course Martinelli number 11. That front three is a lot more narrow than we usually see, with Ben White offering that threat and the width on the right-hand side. If we compare that, let's say, to Arsenal's last game with Saka wide against Crystal Palace, we can clearly see the width is given by the Arsenal attacker, number 7, Bukayo Saka. And that fluidity and that ability to be different is going to mean that Arsenal are harder to deal with and harder to stop. Gabriel Jesus was absolutely brilliant on his first start since injury. He had 4 shots in the game, created a chance, completed 4 of his 8 dribbles, won a penalty and scored a brace, and arguably could have scored himself a hat-trick. He had a really good chance on 11 minutes that he just headed over the bar. One room for improvement for Jesus, maybe scoring with his head. But his reintroduction into the Arsenal team is only going to make them harder to play against. And in the back end of the season, when beating low blocks, but also coming up against the likes of Newcastle and Liverpool, it's going to be vitally important. In the title race, of course, Manchester City started off the weekend in emphatic form. That 4-1 win against Liverpool. And it was such a basic win for Pep Guardiola's team. Yes, there was threat from Liverpool. We had the counter-attacks. We had the Salah goal that came against the run of play. We also had the Salah chance from the counter-attack from a corner that was stopped by Jack Grealish. But it was a simple game for Manchester City. They overloaded Liverpool 4v2 in the centre of the park. That's something you do not want to do against this Manchester City team. Jurgen Klopp, in fact, went to a 4-2-3-1 shape. Manchester City were without Erling Haaland, which I think gave them some good value up front. But the main issue, of course, that we mentioned before was the 4v2 overload in the centre of the park. John Stones was absolutely fantastic from right back moving inside. But the bigger issue was Gundogan moving high and Liverpool not being able to deal with it. So Liverpool played a kind of 4-4-2 shape in defence. Salah dropping off and joining Gakpo to basically try and block those passes into midfield. But what Manchester City simply did, which they've done many times under Pep Guardiola, was play Kevin De Bruyne high, have their central midfielder Ilkay Gundogan moving into attacking midfield and having a fullback narrow. This basically created massive problems for Liverpool in the sense of they simply couldn't deal with it. When Manchester City were dominating the ball and possession and Liverpool were having to squeeze, you had a massive problem for Fabinho and Jordan Henderson. Do they press the football deep in midfield at the feet of either John Stones or Rodri, or do they deal with the players in behind? And this just kept causing so many problems. When City decided to play through and play a little bit more direct, you had a massive issue for Liverpool with, the ball being rotated to one of the wingers, the midfield being drawn over and then simply being switched through and creating angles, of course, for the first goal with a simple ball through to Jack Grealish to slide it back to Julian Alvarez. But it all came through that central overload that City just completely dominated Liverpool in that moment. It's simple stuff. We know that City attack with 5 attackers. We know that you got to control that midfield. I thought it was a big blunder from Jurgen Klopp for not going for a traditional 3-man midfield and looking for a 4-4-2 defensive shape. It gave City the advantage. It allowed them to combine and isolated the likes of Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andy Robertson against 2 players at times for Manchester City. Really simple for Guardiola, one of the easiest wins in this game that we've seen in recent years, and we can clearly see that Manchester City 3-2-5 attacking structure and Liverpool's really dodgy organisation in their 4-4-2 from the average positions. Man of the match, of course, went to Jack Grealish, a goal and assist. He's been absolutely brilliant since the World Cup. He's been directly involved in 8 goals. Only Bukayo Saka and Mohamed Salah have been involved in more goals as wingers in the Premier League. The 5 assists, only behind Leandro Trossard in the Premier League as well. He's finally probably hitting that Pep Guardiola style, 90% pass completed, 6 out of his 8 duels won, 2 out of 2 dribbles completed, 3 shots all on target, a goal and assist. Absolutely fantastic on the left-hand side. And we are seeing a change in Manchester City by their wide players and now the creators in the side. Previously, we'd seen City players out wide score the goals. Think Phil Foden, think Riyad Mahrez. Now we're seeing them create chances. Riyad Mahrez, 5 assists since the World Cup. Jack Grealish, 5 assists as well. Both of them absolutely fantastic. In fact, Riyad Mahrez created 6 chances against Liverpool, 2 more than the entire Liverpool team managed combined. One final bit on Manchester City's game with Liverpool. Of course, the yellow card that everyone's talking about. Rodri probably should have been sent off at 1-1 on 32 minutes. I think the instance that you look at this situation is that if Rodri wasn't booked, it is a guaranteed yellow card. So for me, it has to be a yellow card independent of that. So the situation that Rodri stopped, of course, to get booked was a counter-attack. Diogo Jota riding the challenge and then getting brought down by Rodri as Liverpool broke. A definite yellow card. But Rodri had already committed a number of little tactical fouls before that, which meant the referee definitely booked Rodri for this. But look into that second situation, Cody Gakpo receiving on the counter-attack. This is even more of a yellow card than the first one. Of course, Gakpo beats Akanji on the dribble, and Liverpool potentially have a 4v2 counter-attack. We're talking Mohamed Salah, we're talking Harvey Elliott, Gakpo, and Diogo Jota who can join the break on the counter. For me, this is a definite yellow card. Rodri is committing a tactical foul, and if you get frustrated with these situations, then this has to be a sending off. Liverpool should have the advantage. It should be 11-10. Manchester City should definitely lose Rodri from this position. They're my 2 cents on this move. It's a guaranteed yellow card, and if we compare both of the instances, they're very, very similar. The first one was a yellow card, the second one wasn't. Both yellow cards for me. Liverpool should have been playing 11-10 for 60 minutes. Would that change the outcome? Potentially. So finally, let's touch on the race for the top 4. Manchester United were awful against Newcastle in the Premier League. Manchester United now have all the work to do. At one point it looked like United were guaranteed for the top 4, the third possession slot, absolutely theirs. But some recent poor performances in the Premier League without Casemiro are starting to cause a lot of problems for Manchester United. Newcastle were the better team. They absolutely bullied United, creating an XG of 3.68. But tactically, I thought Erik Ten Hag got a few things wrong, but United overall were awful on the ball. Too many passes, not to the feet, not to the head of the player, playing behind the player, and just general sloppiness at the base of midfield. So Manchester United came off the back of beating Newcastle in the League Cup final, playing quite a simple way, not playing out from the back, playing long balls up to the centre forward, looking to win the second ball and then playing in the middle third. What United really struggled with against Newcastle in this game is they kept on getting to the final third, but either losing it or playing back. United, of course, without Casemiro, a far worse side. United have got a massive hole in their squad at the moment. No number 6 apart from Casemiro. That is a humongous problem. We spoke many times about United's poor squad building, but that is a massive issue right now. Anytime that Casemiro doesn't play for United, United don't have a controlling midfielder to get on the ball and dictate the play from deep. What Erik Ten Hag did from the start against Newcastle was play both Bruno and Sabitzer deep in midfield, and Scott McTominay basically with a man-to-man job stopping Bruno Guimaraes. Bruno Guimaraes has ran the show for Newcastle this season in the Premier League. He basically gets on the ball and controls the tempo for them. So Scott McTominay playing high makes a little bit of sense. The issue though for Manchester United, not only were they poor building up, but transitionally they were absolutely awful, and that's not something that you can do against Newcastle. One of the biggest concerns I had for United, not only was it, the two central midfielders not being very defensively minded. Marcel Sabitzer naturally is a forward. Yes, he does a great job in defensive midfield when playing against a player that wins the ball back. When you're playing Bruno and Sabitzer, you have problems in a sense of they both naturally aren't great at moving out to the flank and defending. But also there's a situation where United's transition was very, very poor. When Newcastle broke, especially in that first half, Marcus Rashford and Antony weren't making those defensive runs. And that is a big, big problem, which led to Newcastle's dominance in the first part of the game, where frequently we saw a 2v1 on Luke Shaw with Kieran Trippier and Murphy out wide, which created a number of opportunities. You take that first move where David De Gea made a brilliant double save, first on Isak and then on Joe Willock. It all came down Man United's left-hand side. A through ball from Trippier, Murphy in behind, the cutback or the cross into the box for Isak to head it. That was very, very poor. But the issue came from United not defending those wide areas in the transition. Rashford and Antony need to be a lot better in those situations. Yes, Marcus Rashford's having his best goal-scoring season ever with 27 goals in all competitions, but it doesn't mean that he doesn't defend. On the flip side, if you look at Jack Grealish, great example at the moment. How many big defensive moments has he had in recent weeks? He had a massive one against Liverpool in the defensive transition. Liverpool breaking on from a corner, Grealish making a vital interception to stop a certain goal. We need to see more of Marcus Rashford defending. That being said, I thought the selection of Weghorst was poor up front. I thought having Rashford through the middle in this game would have been a lot better, and having maybe a Jadon Sancho playing more of a defensive role, allowing Rashford to hit the channels and looking to break behind that space behind Kieran Trippier. Because if you don't track Trippier, it will cause you problems, but there is massive space to break. United didn't find that situation at all. One of the biggest problems, of course, spoke about the defensive transition, the wingers not tracking back to get on the ball, but the link play between the front three was absolutely atrocious. Weghorst had the fewest touches of any player on the pitch. Every time it seemed that United got the ball to him, to his feet, it was coming straight back. Same with Scott McTominay in the first half. When the ball was getting up to him, United were losing it. It was just so sloppy. And one of the biggest problems was in the build-up. Without Casemiro, United lack a central player in the build-up. What United need to do is utilise Luke Shaw in that central position. They need to go to the City 3-2-5 shape. We've seen how well John Stones has done it in recent weeks, but that would allow United to overload Newcastle's press. We all know that Newcastle press with three players, they're three central players, they press super high with their midfielders. But what United could do from a possession perspective in these games where teams squeeze super high is simply transition to the wide players. Get the ball into those central areas, look to utilise Luke Shaw, look to utilise Sabitzer, drop Diogo Dalot, get him to kind of draw that central midfield press, which means Dan Burn would have to commit. You've got a simple potential ball from David De Gea out wide to Bruno Fernandes, and then you're breaking him behind the midfield. That didn't happen enough, and I thought Luke Shaw especially was poor in his decision-making, because when he got it right, United created some good opportunities out of the back. So let's pick up one of the better passing moves of the game for Manchester United on the 27th minute with Luke Shaw moving into that central position. This didn't happen enough and needs to happen more. As teams press Manchester United high, they need to deal with that pressure with better football. Anyway, let's pick up the move with Raphael Varane playing a forward pass to Scott McTominay. It was one of the times where Scott McTominay received and played forward well. One of my frustrations in this game is every time United played one of these good moves and progressed the play, what we saw was United going back into the Newcastle press. We saw that again as Scott McTominay turned, played forward to Marcus Rashford, little 1-2 combination play, but the ball being dropped back allowing Newcastle to reset. It was a constant problem. In the League Cup, when United broke the Newcastle lines, they attacked. United were too scared on the ball in this game to go forward, and it was super frustrating. But let's move the play on to a bit that I liked about it. This was Luke Shaw moving inside. We can see the overload here. We mentioned before how Liverpool overloaded 4v2 in the centre of the park. United could have done it 4v3 in the centre of the park and allowed them to dominate that central area and play through. We could see on screen Newcastle's three centre midfielders, Joe Willock, Longstaff, and of course Bruno Guimaraes. With Luke Shaw moving to that central area, it creates that overload. That is space for Luke Shaw to do this, which he didn't do enough in the match. As Luke Shaw receives, you can see he's got space. He's going to pull the winger over, which again could lead to massive progression, easy progression to United's left winger. Of course, Rashford spent the majority of the game out there, but this was an instance where Anthony had swapped with Marcus Rashford. If you're drawing the player in, if you're drawing in Jacob Murphy into this central area, you're going to create huge space for the left winger to get 1v1 with a fullback. The amount of times that Rashford's destroyed fullbacks this season, why did United not do this? Super frustrating. But as Luke Shaw received the ball in central midfield, we can clearly see that he's got time, he's got space, but also it opens up progressive passes. You know, the classic thing that this box in midfield creates, it's forward passing options. But you can see United rotate the ball, nice out of the back. You can see a bit of control in here in the central position that we didn't see with Luke Shaw in this central position. But also, as I mentioned before, you've got that man-to-man structure from Newcastle. You know, now, of course, Longstaff's been drawn in to deal with Luke Shaw. Sabitza's getting picked up by Joe Willock, which creates a forward passing option into the feet of one of those attacking players. Super frustrating that we didn't see this enough, because this is a fine example. If Luke Shaw had played more in that central position, United have had lots of ball. Of course, it didn't happen in this passage of play. United simply played out the back more, drew the Newcastle press and lost possession. Frustrating times, but you can see the solution here is right here. It's here to see. Luke Shaw needs to play more like an inverted wing-back in these games where teams squeeze United in these central areas. Anyway, let's move on to the goal that Newcastle scored. The opener, I thought it was a fantastic goal, but it came from United's own poor play out of the back. This was the possession that led to the Newcastle goal. Of course, United playing out from the back. One of the issues that we said there, Luke Shaw not moving inside into central midfield, not supporting the defensive midfielder, but of course, nobody really taking that role anyway. This is something that Casemiro has done time and time again, receiving in this kind of number 6 position. I think, of course, you know, people have been very critical of Scott McTominay. I thought he was one of Man United's better players off the ball against Newcastle. I thought he carried quite well. But as a player, he's not a traditional number 6. He's not a number 6 that gets on the ball. Hence why I think there's a humongous issue with Manchester United's squad. Scott McTominay should be dropping here, given that he's the number 6 right now to receive. Rafael Varane takes a bad touch, gets closed down. There's no pass in between the lines of the Newcastle press. Loses the ball, which consequently leads to the Newcastle attack. From this position, there's a number of issues for Manchester United. I think number 1, without Casemiro, you don't protect the back 2 centre-backs enough. You expose them. But also there's some really weird play from Luke Shaw in this moment. So let's move on to Newcastle, moving it into midfield. I think the first issue that we got here, both Scott McTominay and Bruno Fernandes are pressing the ball. McTominay is more of an 8 than a number 6. Defensively, in possession, you know, he's going to excel in a number 8 role if he plays there for a side, in my perspective. I think Newcastle will be a great place for him if that comes down. Their 8s are very aggressive. They squeeze high. They're not involved in the build-up. That's Bruno Guimaraes. But we can clearly see massive problems. Not only is Joe Willock playing in between the lines, but Isak is receiving off. From this moment, Luke Shaw makes a terrible decision, dives in on Isak. Rafael Varane's already squeezing the play. Luke Shaw dives in, opens up massive space for Bruno Guimaraes to run in behind the defence, clip a ball to the back post, head across, United concede. And if you're thinking how bad United were in this game, the decisions that were made for this goal were absolutely atrocious. You know, we've already lost one centre-back. You've got another player jumping out. You know, if Luke Shaw takes a deeper position, the through ball's not on. Has Isak got the quality to potentially play it with Luke Shaw there? Yes, but Luke Shaw can make a defensive interception or win the ball back. It's simply so sloppy for Manchester United and loses them a massive game that they really had to win. Overall, I think you've got to give Newcastle the plaudits in this match. Eddie Howe lost the League Cup final, but put a massive, massive performance in as Newcastle sit currently in third position in the Premier League. Kieran Trippier was the absolute man of the match, grabbed an assist from a corner, but in terms of his chance creation, 4 chances created, 1 big chance as well. He completely controlled the game in that first half, and United really struggled to deal with Newcastle. That right-hand side was very, very devastating. United couldn't deal with it from a tactical or technical perspective, and it's a real lesson for Erik Ten Hag and Manchester United. Number one, they need to be much better out of the back. They need to utilise Luke Shaw in a number 6 position when teams press them high, but also from a market perspective, they need to get a Casemiro replacement. They need a deputy. They need a number 2. Or they're not going to get, where they need to be. It's massively important United sign a 6, sign a 8, sign a centre forward, potentially sign a right back. It's going to be a big, big summer for Manchester United. But anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The sackings, of course, Arsenal with Gabriel Jesus back, and Manchester United's shocking performance against Newcastle in the race for the top 4. United's performances against the top 9 sides away from home has been atrocious. They haven't won a game yet. Rubbish. Anyway, I'm in Statman Dave. Check out SofaScore. Subscribe if you're new. We'll see you later.